Welcome. This will be my review of the 1976 arcade game Breakout. I would say there's going to be no spoilers, but this is a game that is impossible to spoil. And yeah, I really love this game. So I played this on PC through the Atari 50 anniversary celebration, and I do not remember if this is DLC or if it comes with, if you just buy the regular package for it. Yeah, this is a very straightforward game. This is perfect for, just unwinding after you've done all you can for that day to try to, non-violently obviously, politically fight back against Donald. May the sun never set on the U.S. Trumpire Trump. I jest. He definitely does not know that reference. Yeah, basically, so I did not invent the following comparison. That is something that is actually in, when you load up the game, it says, basically it's Pong, but instead of two paddles, it's, there are these blocks that you have to hit with the ball. And I only fairly recently was able to play this once I got the, Atari 50, etc. But this is one of those games that you can keep doing and maybe adding to or such. I don't think I've personally played a version that's more recent than DX Bowl 2, which I guess by now is like 25 years old or thereabouts. But I wouldn't rule out, like, this definitely seems like the kind of thing they could also make a new version for, like, smartphones. You play 5 minutes while you're on the bus or something, similar to how Columns got a bunch of, let's see, Connect 3, I think they're called, games, Match 3 games. But yeah, so basically, if you've ever played, I realize even Pong is, if you haven't, I feel old saying it, but I'm sure there are young people who do not know what Pong, the video game, is, but which I guess might also mean they don't know what DX Ball 1 and 2 are. But yeah, if you know DX Ball, it's basically that, but simpler. This does not have the laser gun and all those, special power-ups in general, but it's got that wonderful simplicity that a lot of arcade games really thrive on. You basically, easy to play but difficult to master. You will immediately understand what you're supposed to do, and then it's just about get good. Right. I'm not going to go over all the aspects of arcade games as a general rule. I talk about that at the start of my Space Harrier 2 review. So if you aren't already familiar with arcade and arcade style games, that's where I talk about that. But yeah, it is simple physics. You could, I suppose, also think of it somewhat like billiards, pool. And yeah, basically that is it. I believe this is one of the ones that essentially doesn't have an ending. You can play for as long as, it's going to get increasingly difficult the longer you play, but yeah, it'll just, if you complete an entire level, it'll just, I think this is one of the ones where each level looks the same, but it is a little, maybe the ball moves a little faster, for example. And so, yeah, high score chasing is something it really is built for. And yeah, the controls are very straightforward and responsive. Basically, you are just moving the paddle, left or right. And there's also a specific button for launching the ball, which you have to press at the start, and each time you lose a ball. And if you lose, I think it's 3 balls, then you have to start over. And yeah, it can genuinely get quite addictive to play. And I think that is about, yeah. So the graphics, it is obviously, so as mentioned, 1976, this is, so that helps you understand these are quite simplistic graphics. DX Ball looked much more advanced comparatively. And other than that, it runs very smoothly today via aforementioned, Atari 50, and the sound design is quite good. Given how simple it is, and that's not a criticism, that's a description, neutral. Obviously, sound design is one of the places where it can, and yeah, it feels like there's weight to the ball, and it feels very satisfying to, gradually get the blocks with it, because obviously, like, this is one of the ones where, like, the gameplay loop almost immediately starts, like, looping. Like, genuinely all you're doing is paddling this ball, back at the blocks, and then, catching it, sending it back. Yeah, you wouldn't think that it was something you could, and I'm sure for many, like, if you don't like arcade games, this one is not going to change your mind. Like, for that kind of thing, I would probably say, as of the Atari 50 ones, well, yeah. So one of the ones that I would, yeah, of the Atari 50 ones, like Black Widow, for example, was something where you might get really caught up in it if you don't normally like, if you just like, the fast-paced, shooty gameplay, and if you like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, certainly those first two arcade, yeah, the one from 89 and the one from 91 called Turtles in Time, those are really great. But yeah, I think that does pretty well cover it. Yeah, it's very straightforward, but you can also really see why it's the kind of thing that every so often would get, a new version. I believe one of the versions was called Arkanoids or something like that, and that's also, yeah, every so often there would be enough of an improvement in technology that the gameplay and or graphics would be, from what I recall, I must say it has been decades since I last played Arkanoids, but from what I recall, that one is gameplay-wise very similar to this one. It's possible that DX Ball was the first time that they were able to really grow and evolve the gameplay, which, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of games that you wouldn't be able to make, super exciting. I'm not sure there's much you could do with regular Pong, for example, because, like, if one of the players has, like, a laser gun, what does that mean for the other one? But, the moment there's these blocks to break, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to talk about it forever, because I will do videos on the DX Ball games later, but, there's a certain satisfaction to carrying out a particularly, difficult, you know, yeah, breaking blocks in that one. And yeah, this is one of those games where you can look at it and be like, I'm really glad that games are more advanced now, but I can also see why people would line up to play something like this, because, like, before electronic video games, it was, or I guess electronic games, whatever, like, you wouldn't necessarily, there's a lot of people who were surprised that caught on, and now it's one of the biggest industries, and yeah, I rate this 8. I need sleep. 8 breakable blocks via paddle out of 10. And if you have 4 hours and you can stomach looks maxing, Dead Domain's video debunking the fraud hoax, Mogging Clavicular is a really solid video that yet again displays Jordan's knack for impersonations.